I'm Olivia, and I'm here today with Sabrina.
Hi Olivia, thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here.
So today we'll be discussing child trafficking for our listeners. Could you explain for us what child trafficking is?
Sure, child trafficking refers to the exploitation of girls and boys, primarily for forced labor and sexual exploitation.
Can you give us some insight on how children get trafficked?
Traffickers usually start by targeting victims that are more vulnerable and in need. They will gain the victim's trust and meet their needs so that they become dependent on the trafficker. A lot of these trafficked and exploited children are groomed at a young age and won't realize what the trafficker's intentions are.
Is it true that human trafficking is usually a violent crime and committed by someone the victim doesn't know?
Actually, those statements are both myths. Many survivors were trafficked with non-violent psychological means by those closest to them.
What are some reasons children are being trafficked?
As I mentioned earlier, children are often trafficked for the purpose of providing commercial sex and exploitative labor.
Next, let's get into how this can affect our listeners.
Well, to start, girls are 2 times likelier to be reported as trafficking victims. Girls also tend to be trafficked for forced marriages and forced sex trade. This means victims are coerced or seduced into commercial sex so that the trafficker will benefit.
Are boys also at a risk for trafficking?
Yes, actually, boys and men are just as likely to be victims of human trafficking as girls and women. However, they are less likely to be identified and reported. This is because they fear others will shame, blame, or just discredit them altogether. And for some, self-denial or self-victim blaming are the initial hurdles preventing them from receiving the help they need. Males are actually ideal victims for labor trafficking due to their strength and stamina for difficult labor, and the fact that they don't draw as much attention as a woman would if she were seen being forced to do the same sort of job. Most people may not think much about this issue, as we often see it as irrelevant to our everyday life. However, you need to keep in mind that while it may not be a reality for you, it is a reality for many people, possibly even someone you know.
I completely agree. Human trafficking really is a crime against humanity. So now that we know what human trafficking is, tell us a little bit about how we can help.
One way you can help in your everyday life is by making more ethical choices when you shop. When you spend your money on slave-free goods, you help stop the flow of funding to human traffickers. Instead, you're redirecting the flow of funds to brands that provide a living wage, safe working conditions, and sustainably made goods.
What about fair trade certified goods? Are those important?
Fair trade certified goods are made all over the world, are sold in the U.S. Not only are they empowering people, but they are also sustainable for the environment and supporting local economies in the developing countries they hail from.
Where can we buy these products?
Goods with a little stamp that says fair trade on them is one way to be sure your product was made ethically. Stores such as Whole Foods, Lassen's, and Vaughn's have a selection of fair trade goods.
Let's move on to online safety now. How do you suggest we approach using social media in today's world?
First, I encourage never sharing pictures of yourself online that you wouldn't want to be seen by your family, teachers, or a total stranger.
Yes, I agree. It's very important to remember that once it's posted, it can be passed around to anybody.
Second, set your user profile to private so that only real friends can get access. Know who you're chatting with. A friend is not always a friend. Don't share personal information online such as your full name, school, address or phone number, current location, or user passwords.
This is a good tip to note since so many kids are putting their school names in their bios, not realizing how dangerous it can be. Putting your school name on the internet will help traffickers to know where to find you and can put you in danger.
This next suggestion I would say is the most important, and that is don't meet up in person with anyone you met online. That is a very dangerous scenario that should only be considered if a trusted adult can go with you and you meet in a public place. Going alone will put you in danger of being lured into trafficking.
And always report suspected abuse to law enforcement or a trusted adult, even if you're not sure, even if you're just suspicious. It's better to be safe than sorry. Okay, now let's talk about how to protect yourself from being trafficked.
Number 1 is to trust your judgment. If a situation or individual makes you uncomfortable, trust that feeling. Although most victims don't realize they're being trafficked until it is too late, it's always a good idea to let a trusted friend or relative know if you're meeting someone new. Usually traffickers will befriend their victims and gain their trust to manipulate them into doing what they want. If you know the person but feel the location or situation is suspicious, you should let a trusted friend know then as well.
What about personal information? Should I ever share it?
You should keep all important documents and identification in your possession at all times. Your partner or employer does not have the right to take or hold your documents without your permission. Sharing it is up to you, so please be smart with whom you share it with.
What are some situations that might raise these concerns?
A would-be employer may refuse to give workers a signed contract, ask them to sign a contract in a language they can't read, or charge a potential worker fee for the opportunity to work in a particular job. A family member, friend, or coworker could be recruited for an opportunity that requires them to move far away, but the recruiter or prospective employer evades answering their questions or is reluctant to provide detailed information about the job.
What is one technique what is another way a trafficker can acquire a victim?
Sometimes victims are guided into the life by entry into a gang or because they've run away from home and have no way to provide for themselves.
Where do traffickers find their prey?
Traffickers shop for their victims online, in shopping malls, bus stops, at hangout locations like fast food restaurants or parks. Even after-school programs at school or in the community where a group of teens is likely to gather can be scouted by these perpetrators. They are willing to invest a lot of time in choosing a victim. Initial contact usually begins with a compliment or "come on."
What is one technique that these traffickers like to use?
Lures include the use of promises, drugs, alcohol, or violence to gain control over the victim. Sometimes the perpetrator offers expensive clothing, cell phones, money, or other gifts in exchange for sex acts. Victims will find these offers appealing since the trafficker will know their victim's weaknesses. For many, the idea of love and security from the trafficker will draw them in.
Are there any other things they might do?
They are also excellent at manipulating young boys and girls who might be going through a difficult time. They zone in on kids that spend unsupervised time at home or in other after-school locations. Don't trust people who come up to you and offer a job or opportunity such as a modeling or singing career.
And always remember, women can also be traffickers. Let's talk about what to take note of in a suspicious situation.
Take mental notes about specifics in the situation: license plate, car make and model, clothes, identifying factors, visible tattoos, etc. Then report the incident.
And as always, tell a trusted adult. Now we'll move on how to determine if someone is being trafficked.
Recurring physical abuse such as burn marks, bruises, or cuts, unexplained absences from class, suddenly sexualized behavior, less appropriately dressed than before, or new expensive clothes, accessories, or shoes are an indicator.
And what about an older significant other? Does that mean anything?
Yes, older boyfriend or new friends with a different lifestyle and talking frequently about wild parties or inviting other students to attend parties can be a sign of trafficking. Also, possession of hotel room keys or a fake ID.
All right. Thank you for joining us today to talk about child trafficking. I hope you've all learned something that will help you keep you safe.